Wow, I wish we'd had the exterior doors open at that point. It was really impressive, filling the halls. So welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. I am Sharon Roberts. My pronouns are she, her, and I am this morning's worship associate. For those of you that take note, this is the same sweater as last week. Because it is my dress up, be involved with worship sweater. I am still short. We're working on that. So, we gather in worship to find meaning and to live more deeply. Worship creates connections within, among, and beyond us, calling us to our better selves, calling us to live with vision, wisdom, and compassion. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we're glad you're here. A special welcome this morning to our guest speaker, Brooks McLain from the HIV Alliance and Eugene Pride. If today is your first time with us, we'd love to get to know you. Our welcoming room is located in the South Foyer, out that way. It's a place for both long-time and first-time people to meet. And if you're online, the link to our visitor form is being dropped into the chat now. You can use your phone to access a copy of our order of service by scanning the QR codes that are scattered throughout the building. We also have large print paper copies that you can get from our ushers. There you will find names of authors and composers. You'll find the text to choir anthems and resources used in our service as well. We light the chalice. Liz will be our chalice lighter today. We light the chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, with these words from Paul Richards. Paul is one of the many Unitarian Universalists who died of AIDS. In all this madness, even if it kills every single one of us and there's no one left to tell the stories, it matters that we love each other well. And now, let's say together the words of our mission, which affirm our shared purpose. Empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world.
Good Sunday morning, everyone. My name is Youngsun Ryu, and I'm the minister serving this congregation. I use the pronouns she and her, and for those who would be helped by a visual description, I've got black glasses, and I've got my hair down today, and I'm wearing a bright red sweater for in honor of World AIDS Day today. So glad you're all here. We've got just a few announcements because there's so much going on. But today, Sunday, there is the winter spiral happening tonight at 5 o'clock. It's going to be a beautiful, very meditative, spiritual ritual. We'll have 3 harps here. This whole area will be cleared out except for a labyrinth. And so I hope you come back tonight for that event. And of course, we've got our listening circle right after the service. Let's make it 11:30. The listening circle concerning the situation in the Middle East. We'll start it at 11:30 so that you can have a chance to go and talk to the folks from HIV Alliance who have a table set up in the hallway, the south hallway there. I think that's all for the announcements today. It is the first Sunday of Advent, and for those of us who still connect with the Christian holidays, this is a season that's really important to us. It's a season of deepening spirituality as we move into the continuing darkness of the season, because that darkness, I do believe, is an invitation for each and every one of us to go as deep as we can into ourselves, which then connects us to everything else. So I hope that you will join in this communal practice of observing each Sunday as we lead to Christmas. And so I'm going to light the first candle today for hope. And I'd like to ask you to just infuse this season with all of your hope. So I want to ask you, what gives you hope? What gives you hope today? Children of all sizes and ages.
Being here.
Being here in this community with these people, gives me hope too.
Healing
Healing, experiencing healing.
for myself and others.
Healing for yourself and others.
Peace
Peace. You have hope for peace.
in so many places, but especially in the Mideast.
Yes.
Sounds strange, but impermanence.
Impermanence, the truth of impermanence gives you a sense of hope. I actually get that. Yeah, and I see other heads nodding, like, yes, we understand.
Leaders from the past.
Did you say theaters?
Leaders.
Oh,
Leaders from the past.
leaders from the past give you hope for the future. Love,
Generosity.
generosity,
Music.
music, nature,
Ingenuity.
rain, ingenuity gives us hope. A smile, healing. There's a lot of hope in this room. People say these are despairing times. People say people have lost all hope, and it's not true. It's not true. There's a lot of hope still. I want to thank Brooks for being here. You know, the LGBTQIA plus community has had an understandably fraught relationship with the faith community, right? I think that's fair to say. Given the way that some religions have used their beliefs to denigrate and shame and deny basic rights to some members of our human family. And as open and progressive and inclusive as we Unitarian Universalists like to think of ourselves and see ourselves, you know that anything that kind of looks like a church, sounds like a church, quacks like a church, is going to be seen as church by people, and they are not going to want to have anything to do with church. And that's a terrible shame that that's what religion has done. And we are trying to do something totally different. So this summer, when we had some conflict around a proposed faith area at Eugene Pride, I want to thank you, Brooks, for handling that whole situation with such grace and such love of community and honoring relationships. And so one of the reasons that I wanted to invite you here today is because we want to build these relationships where in Eugene Springfield there are these areas of healing and hope and promise and love and compassion. I know that that is everywhere in our local community, and with people like you and others, we're just making those brighter and stronger. So thank you for being here. So for the entire month of December, the spiritual theme here is mystery. Now, mystery can be seen in a couple of different ways. You can take the kind of vertical orientation to mystery, to see mystery as like an I-thou relationship, right? And then, so God is mystery itself. You can also take a look at mystery from a horizontal perspective and see everything imbued with mystery, right? Everything, everywhere. So much mystery. And then mystery provokes a couple of different kinds of reactions in people, right? Like mystery can make us curious and fascinated and really interested to move forward. But sometimes mystery, the unknown, things that are beyond our knowing, can instill some fear, right? And this is what happened during the height of the AIDS crisis. We saw such incredible fear, inspiring, misguided, even hateful actions. We saw what could happen when we were led by our fear rather than our courage. In 1989, the Unitarian Universalists were among the first religious groups to make a public statement, public resolution about the AIDS crisis. The resolution was specifically to increase accessibility to health care for people living with AIDS and HIV. In part, here's what the statement says about why we thought it was important to make this statement. Because we, Unitarian Universalists, reject the fear and loathing of the human body and its inherent sexuality instilled by some religious traditions. And we reject the notion of disease as divine punishment or a natural retribution for moral failure. In the midst of this ongoing epidemic, millions and millions of people still choose to reject fear and embrace courage and love instead. And that reminds us that every single morning that we get up, we have the exact same choice laid out in front of us. So come, let us embrace the heart of courage. Come, let us worship together. Now let us turn our hearts to the concerns of this community. First of all, I want to thank the family of Joyce Salisbury for leaving the flowers here. These are from her memorial service yesterday, and they brought lots and lots of flowers. And in our book, we have so many memories and remembrances for Joyce Salisbury, longtime member of this congregation. So thank you for writing these appreciations. One very poignantly said something like, I wish I would have made the time to get to know her better. And these are always opportunities for us to remember how precious life is. And if you think about picking up the phone, just go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do that. Today, I sadly have to light the candle of life for Fred Schultz. Fred died on Saturday morning. We knew that he was at hospice house. We knew that his time was not going to be long with us, but still, when the day comes, it still hits hard. Fred Schultz, another longtime member of this congregation, beloved by many. We're thinking about his wife, Linda, today. So as we enter this winter holiday season, I know that a lot of us are holding grief and really feeling those empty spaces at the table where people are missing. So if you are missing people today, I just invite you to fill the air with their names. You know, sometimes that's all we can do when we're missing someone, is just call their name. O Holy One, Spirit of life, you whom we call by many names and sometimes no name at all. Sometimes our prayer is just yelling out. Sometimes it's a whisper, and sometimes our prayer is a song. Sometimes our prayer has no words and is just silent, with the confidence that somehow, some way, someone understands us. Somehow, some way, in the mystery of this life, we can feel like we're not alone, that someone understands, someone is holding us. O Spirit of life, we give you thanks for this day, for this one day. May we make the most of it. Amen.
In the late 1970s, I was beginning my studies in infectious disease epidemiology at UCLA School of Public Health. I had a subscription to the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. The MMWR, as it's affectionately known, is a weekly publication covering disease trends and relevant information on disease outbreaks. My fellow students and I took note of reports of mysterious fungal infections in gay men in San Francisco and New York City. In time, the disease, with its array of unusual associated infections and nearly 100% fatality rate, would be known as GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency disease. Then it became known as gay cancer. Eventually, as cases were observed in other populations, the more inclusive name AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, would become official. The Reagan administration paid little attention. The Red Cross downplayed the possible role of blood-borne infection. Gay men fought the closure of bathhouses, and hemophiliacs, who were just at that time receiving a new miraculous treatment derived from blood, were worried it would be taken off the market. Eventually, a novel virus was identified, the first human immunodeficiency virus ever discovered. Its affinity for a particular cellular receptor on human T cells, its very high mutation rate, and its ability to both elude and eventually destroy the immune response were stunning, and the virus slowly rendered the infected individual susceptible to all manner of infections and conditions rarely seen in adult humans. Through nothing more than the random circumstance of its introduction into the gay communities of Europe and North America, the virus ravaged the gay, IV drug-using, and hemophiliac communities. The marginal nature of these communities made it too easy to ignore the disease. But in time, it spread to all human communities. Eventually, through the courageous activism of the gay community, we were all challenged to confront the disease and support the affected people. The director of NIH, Dr. Anthony Fauci, became an ally and changed the way the research community works with patients. As each new drug was discovered and tested, it would eventually fail. Until through testing these drugs in innumerable different combinations, researchers were able to slow infection and even halt the disease. People who only a few years before had faced a certain death sentence now could manage the disease as a chronic condition. This came with a cost, though, of many different side effects, lifelong surveillance, and financial burden. And yet, through all of this, HIV/AIDS retains the stigma of being a disease that good people don't get. In the early 2000s, as a college professor, one of my immunology students told me that I didn't need to teach about HIV, because if you lived a moral life, you wouldn't get it. Other students felt it was wrong for public health authorities to provide methods of preventing infection, such as distributing condoms, clean needles, or prophylactic drugs. Again, good people don't do those things. According to an article on CNN just 2 days ago, CDC reported that although blacks made up 42% of new HIV diagnoses in the US in the year 2022, only 13% of those only 13% of blacks at high risk of infection were diagnosed. Let me start again, sorry. According to an article on CNN just 2 days ago, CDC reported that blacks made up 42% of new HIV diagnoses in the US in 2022. However, only 13% of those at high risk were prescribed prophylactic drugs, while 94% of whites at high risk were prescribed those drugs. When one considers all of the now 50,000 quilt panels in the AIDS quilt, memorializing 110,000 individuals, and new panels are being added, each panel was made by someone mourning the loss of a beloved person to this disease. It is abundantly clear that these were all good people. They were beloved family members, friends, and our neighbors. Good people get AIDS. They did in the 1980s, and they still do.
Pardon me. Hi, I'm Brooks McLain. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. I have brown hair. I'm a seemingly middle-aged white guy and have a red shirt on. One moment while I connect my presentation, but I want to thank you all for having me today for this beautiful service. Thank you, Reverend Jen, for inviting me. 35 years later, it's really incredible to see a congregation of this size observing this day. It's really important. It's important to people I know personally and have lost. I am, in addition to the development director of HIV Alliance, I'm also the board president of Eugene Pride, and I can't thank you enough for those of you who came out to Pride this year to help us intervene with those who would rather we not exist. And the organization you did around that was really impactful for our community. So sincerely thank you for that. I hope to see many of you next year, although I wish I didn't have to in that capacity. So today did it work? Not quite. Well, while we wait for that to come up, I will talk about let's see. Well, HIV Alliance was founded in, there we go, 1994 to support people living with HIV and AIDS and to prevent new HIV infections. You see our Eugene headquarters behind you. That's over on City View Street, not too far from us here. We have services in 32 counties across the state of Oregon. So we do client care and care coordination for people living with HIV. We do prevention throughout the state. We offer gender care coordination, behavioral health, PrEP, which was just being talked about by Sharon, and thank you for sharing that story, Sharon, which is medication now that can prevent you from getting HIV if you're at risk. We offer employment services, and we have a pharmacist that we work with. Began in 1988, the first International Day for Global Health. World AIDS Day was an opportunity and still is to unite in the fight against HIV, to show support for people living with HIV, and to commemorate those we have lost. We host observances around the state each year on December 1st. We had 6 this year around the state. Ours in Eugene here was with First Friday Art Walk and Eugene Pride. It was a very kind of really special observance to kind of come together with that many community partners and have that many people there with us. So just, Sharon talked a little bit about HIV and AIDS, the human immunodeficiency virus and acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Those most at risk for contracting HIV are those having unprotected sex, especially LGBTQ folks, and then sharing intravenous equipment. However, it cannot be transmitted through anything else, so drinking, hugging, kissing, or shaking hands. And we still have to say that because there is so much still stigma around HIV. There is, of course, no cure and no vaccine for this disease, although we're getting closer after COVID. However, antiretroviral therapy works by suppressing the viral load. So once your viral load is suppressed, you cannot transmit the disease, and in fact, you'll test negative for it. So our kind of slogan for that is undetectable equals untransmissible. That's a really important message, and a lot of folks don't quite realize that yet. So who's at risk? Everyone can get HIV, although the risk factors vary by kind of your positionality in the world. So women, seniors, teens, people of all races can acquire HIV. Of course, it's more disproportionately affecting certain populations, including men who have sex with men, which is a bit of an outdated term, but that's the term we have. That accounts for about 70% of new HIV infections. And heterosexuals are about 22%, with about 2/3 of those being women. And if you look on kind of the right of this screen, you'll see that 21.6% of transgender women in the United States have HIV. So that's 1 out of 5. And you can kind of see the statistics for Black and Hispanic and white folks. So the same factors that kind of affect, whether you're poor, whether you have access to health care, those are the same risk factors that affect whether you contract HIV or not. And a lot of those things intersect and overlap with each other. So globally, just to kind of position us, there are about almost 40 million people in the world living with HIV at the end of 2022, and over 1.3 million people became infected last year. Sub-Saharan Africa obviously is home to 2/3 of all people living with HIV. It's the hardest hit region in the world, followed by Asia and the Pacific. About 630,000 people died from AIDS-related complications last year. And here in the United States, there's about 1.2 million people living with HIV. And about 13% of those people don't know that they're infected. And that's because they don't have access to testing for the most part. And that's a big part of what we do. Over 32,000 new HIV diagnoses in the United States last year, and 13,000 people died from AIDS-related complications last year. And there are still outbreaks where we get clusters of infections around the country every year. Here in Oregon, there are about 7,600 HIV-positive Oregonians, and of those people, about 1,200 do not know that they're HIV-positive right now. 88% are male, 12% are female. Injection drug use, that's where the risk has kind of shifted in Oregon with the opioid crisis and with the use of injection drugs going up. That's where we see most infections happen now, although men who have sex with men are still the second most likely to get HIV here. This is kind of, your risk factors here in Oregon based on race. So you're 5 times more likely to get HIV if you're black in the state of Oregon. We have a long history of racism in this state, and that manifests in statistics like these. You're 1.8% higher at risk if you are Latino, and you're more likely to be diagnosed late if you're Latino. Also, if you live rurally in the state of Oregon, we have a huge rural outreach program in the state. It's really hard to get health care in a lot of the state because hospitals are so far away, clinics are so far away. And so you're 45% more likely to get diagnosed late if you live in the rural part of the state. Let's see. So 6 of 10 Oregonians have never been tested for HIV, and the CDC recommends every single person in the country be tested for HIV. And that's because you don't know what you don't know, right? And so you could have been exposed and not know that you've been exposed, and so that's the reason for that recommendation. And you'll see here on the right, kind of over time, HIV diagnosis had been going down until COVID hit. And obviously, testing kind of went away during COVID. We weren't able to offer the services that we usually do. People kind of got out of their healthcare routines and weren't able to get in to see their doctor or go to their normal testing clinic. And so just after COVID, we saw quite a big spike, from what we're used to seeing. And that's likely undercounted because folks have not been able to kind of pick back up their testing routine. So we're working hard to combat that and change that. And bring those numbers back down, because that's obviously not something we want to see. So I'll talk a little bit about the opioid crisis that's impacting all of us, or many of us here. So people who inject drugs are at an increased risk for less safe sexual practices. So these things kind of intersect with each other. 20% of people living with HIV report injection drug use. And then hepatitis C is a co-infection that often happens with HIV. And the increase in that is also attributed to the opioid crisis. 50% of people who inject drugs have been exposed to HIV. And just kind of an example of the impact of some of this stuff, in 2015, an HIV outbreak in Indiana via injection drug use resulted in 235 new cases just from that one incidence. 90% of those folks had HCV. And it cost the state of Indiana about $100 million to treat those folks and get that under control. And this was just after the governor at the time, Mike Pence, shut down the needle exchange sites in the state as kind of this moral out panic about injection drug use. And so, there's a lot of kind of scare around needle exchanges, about syringe exchanges, and we try to combat that stigma because addiction, just like any other disease, is a disease. Let's see. People injecting drugs living with HIV are at greater risk of death than any other group of folks living with HIV. And while infection rates have declined with men who have sex with men in Oregon, they have stayed the same among people who inject drugs. Of course, co-infection with hepatitis C results in poor health outcomes for people living with HIV, and 20.1% of people in the US living with HIV also have hepatitis C. So what are we doing about that at HIV Alliance? This is kind of the core of what we want to do, is reverse these trends. So we have client services, and those are a group of folks who support the people who are actually living with HIV and hepatitis C. We have a behavioral health and primary care clinic here in Eugene. We do counseling. You can come to see a doctor. We have supportive housing, as well as a prevention, education, and health-focused street outreach team. So for our client services, care coordination looks like getting people into housing. It looks like emergency financial assistance. It looks like calling doctors' offices and making appointments and navigating the Oregon Health Plan for folks so that they can get insurance. We do nursing case management, so they'll have a nurse who works with them and make sure that they're taking their meds and that they stay on track to meet their health goals. We're very much client outcome centered, so we're not trying to make any person conform to what we're trying to get them to do. We're trying to help them meet the health outcomes that they want for themselves and empower them to do what they can do to take care of themselves. So that can look like pharmaceutical support, make sure we counsel folks about the drugs they're taking and making sure they're staying on them. It can look like employment services, helping them with their resumes and getting them to, driving them to the job interview, that sort of thing. We have a drop-in service. We call it the patio here at our Eugene office. Folks can drop in, use a computer, get clothes and shoes and blankets, food, other kind of basic needs supplies. Of course, hepatitis C case management is in there. Dental navigation is still a big part of what we do. There's still a lot of stigma for folks living with HIV, especially when it comes to getting near their blood, and so a lot of folks don't want to work with those people. So we try to help find dentists for them. So our behavioral health program has been expanding quite rapidly, and the need is overwhelming, so we're really pleased to see that expanding. We do that at our Eugene clinic. We have therapists there. We also have a giant peer program, and that program has recently been expanded due to the support of the funding from Measure 110. So you'll hear a lot of negative about Measure 110. We are seeing some really positive results. Our behavioral health and our peer program are focused on those most at risk for HIV, so Black, Indigenous, other people of color, the LGBTQ plus community, those who are unhoused, and people who inject drugs. And here's kind of the impact of our peers, and I'll have a QR code linked to this if you'd like the slideshow afterwards. But within 30 days, clients that engage with our peer program, we're seeing their drug use go down from about 8.7 days in a month to 6.4 days in a month. We're seeing emergency room visits about 22% of the days in a month they had to go to an emergency room. That is down to 5% of clients, whereas 37% of clients were unemployed. Were employed, that went up to 57% were employed, and then at intake, about 71% had had an HIV test before. After 3 months, 87% had been given an HIV test. And that's really incredible results considering the circumstances a lot of these folks are living under to see that level of change in 90 days. I mean, and peers, they have the lived experience of these folks. So they've been in the situation. They know what it's like kind of viscerally in their body. They can sit with them and talk to them about it. They can drive them to a doctor's appointment. They can be there, just whenever somebody's in crisis to talk to and kind of talk them through it. And when you have someone who cares, it makes it a lot easier to meet a lot of your other health needs. So supportive housing. Housing is obviously a big factor in determining whether you are healthy or not. Multiple studies have shown that housing is a strong predictor of living with HIV than gender, race, age, drug use, or mental health. It's had a significant impact on on medication adherence and overall viral suppression for people living with HIV. And it addresses behavioral health and substance use issues. So we do wraparound services with our housing navigator, our peer support specialist, our behavioral health therapist, our registered nurse are all working together to make sure people have the supports they need. We have an education program, so we're actually going into schools. This is a big topic right now around sexual education in schools. So in some counties in the state, we are the sexual health program for those schools. Youth account for 1 in 5 new HIV diagnoses. However, half of them don't know they're HIV positive. There's a lot of negative kind of messaging around sex in this society, and we're trying to counter that. Youth with HIV are the least likely out of any age group to be linked to care, to be prescribed HIV medications, and have suppressed viral loads. And we reach more than 8,000 youth in Lane, Douglas, and Marion counties. And in the more rural counties, there's been kind of opposition to us kind of going into the schools for many years. However, that has changed with the opioid epidemic because we're seeing, middle schoolers and high schoolers overdose now. And so we do naloxone trainings. We offer naloxone at these presentations so that, teachers and students have what they need to reverse overdoses. We also have an adult component of that too at treatment programs, community court, and community service agencies. This is kind of what it looks like for 30% of youth kind of could not complete our test before they took a class with us. 85% of them could answer the questions correctly at the end. With adults even, about half of them couldn't pass kind of a basic HIV knowledge test. 91% can after going through our education program. And education is really important because of the stigma that they were talking about. We're kind of at a 40-year, we've been trying to play catch up because this disease was treated so differently than any other disease had ever been treated as a moral disease rather than, medicine. Our prevention program, that's one of our more robust programs. Obviously, we want to prevent HIV infection from happening. It costs about $600,000 or more to treat HIV over the course of a lifetime versus 8 cents for a syringe. And so if we can get people to trade their syringes in, then we save, all of you a lot of money. We do free rapid HIV, Hep C, and STI testing. It's confidential. It's very quick. Anyone can access that testing. We do a lot of community outreach. We have events around the state. We operate 18 syringe exchange sites around the state, including up in Hillsborough, on the Oregon coast, down in all the way down to Brookings. We do PrEP navigation, and PrEP is that medication that prevents HIV from taking hold. I'm on it. It's just a once a day pill, very easy to take. So here's kind of what the CDC has to say about syringe exchange programs. So they increase the safe disposal of used syringes so you don't see them on the street. They reduce syringe-related injuries so you don't actually step on it or pick it up accidentally. It reduces syringe sharing among people who inject drugs, and it decreases the rates of HIV and AIDS, which is what we're really concerned about. And it conclusively shows that they do not increase drug use. It actually decreases drug use because it gives folks who don't have access to care, who are not in the medical system, it gives them a point of entry because they're going to see the same person every week, right? And so you get to know Reggie, and then Reggie's asking you how you're doing, and that can connect you to a peer who can then, get you in to see a doctor, who can then, it kind of get you on this positive path where you haven't had an access point before. So clients are 3 times more likely to enter treatment whenever they have access to syringe exchange programs, and they're considered a target population for HIV prevention, supported by the American Medical Association, the World Health Organization, and others. This is kind of what a kit looks like. So you get naloxone, which is obviously life-saving and reverses overdoses. There's Band-Aids, CPR shield, syringes, a sharps container, instructions, and a Good Samaritan card because you can't be sued if you give someone CPR. That's kind of a common misconception. So we put that Good Samaritan card in there. This is a look at our client demographics. In Lane County, about 76% of our clients are white. That's better than the demographics as far as what the county sees overall. And then in Marion County, though, 34% of our clients are Latino, and that kind of mirrors the demographics up there. And this is our continuum of care. So 2,200 people infected, 1,900 of those are diagnosed. We get 1,600 into care, 1,500 on treatment, and 1,400 virally suppressed. We're constantly working to improve those numbers. Ideally, everyone who's infected knows they're infected. That's why we do all of the outreach we do. This is kind of the client risk for HIV. So 36% are men who have, ooh, wow. I did not realize the sound was on for that. So 9% are, gay men who are also injection drug users. Still, though, 33% of folks are heterosexual that get HIV, so it's not as LGBTQ heavy as you might think at first blush. So how can you help us? Making donations, that's really important to us. We do get federal funding, but that's very rigid funding. So we can't use it to kind of fill the gaps for people that we require individual donations and support to make that happen. Things like people living in their car and their window gets broken. We can't use a grant for HIV prevention to fix their window for them. Encourage your friends and family to donate. We have events you can sponsor and attend, like our World AIDS Day commemoration or our big fundraiser in the spring. We have an active social media campaign. You can share those. And then volunteering with us. We wouldn't be able to run our programs without volunteers. That is that syringe exchange, that's testing and counseling. We have support groups. We have kits that you can make if you like to volunteer in groups. Administrative work, public relations, special projects. We have hundreds of, I think we did something like 3,200 hours of volunteers donating their time to us last year. So there's the QR code for the presentation. I'll have that out on the table. I would love to talk to you. Thank you again for having us on this World AIDS Day.
They're going to be up on the screen in a second. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now, friends, go into this brand new day, into this brand new week, into this brand new month, full of a new beginning for yourself. Go out in love, go out in peace.